I'd like to take the opportunity and let everyone introduce themselves to everyone here. So Carl, I'm going to start at your end, and if you can just give some pertinent facts and figures. And
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Carl Soderlin. I'm the Vice President of Worldwide Channels for Aruba. So this is week 9 on the job, but I'm very familiar with a lot of you in the audience from my past time at Avaya as well, so it's good to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Pass it along.
Good day. My name is Mike Leibovitz. I work as the Director of Mobility and Applications for Extreme Networks. I spend most of my time evangelizing wireless out to the industry and, of course, to our customers and prospects. Typically, I look a lot bigger. I was challenged today.
I'm glad I'm not sat there.
It's the jacket.
I think we all look small standing next to Carl, right? Hi, I'm Pete Fox, and I'm responsible for Jobbers business in North America. And I've been there 14 quarters, which is sort of how I measure my life, a quarter at a time. Having a lot of fun, and looking forward to meeting more of you as the week progresses. Thanks.
Thank you, Pete.
So I'm Tom Wesselman, and I'm Director of Ecosystem Architecture at Plantronics. I'm also pretty new. I've been here about 6 months. Before that, I was at Cisco and led engineering for our unified clients and soft phones.
Mark Roberts from ShoreTel, CMO at ShoreTel. I've been at ShoreTel around about 4 months. Prior to that, I was with Mitel, and prior to that, quite a while with Polycom, so I'm familiar with quite a few of you guys in the audience.
Hello, my name is Dave Furtado. I'm with SpectraLink. I too have only been at SpectraLink for about 6 months. So you gotta
Got some rookies here.
got a few guys that have been around, I guess, right? I have about 23 years though with AT&T, Lucent, Avaya, and so forth. Did a couple of startups in between that, and did some mobile advertising stuff. So been around for quite a while, and ready to roll.
Answering your question, 802.11ac is clearly a big driver, but I think more than probably the infrastructure side of it is the types of devices that are coming. So some people would say the Internet of Things is what's going to be the biggest driver in the next 1 to 2 years. Certainly the growth and proliferation of devices that aren't necessarily smartphones or tablets is going to start growing quite rapidly. There's a number of stats, and I usually say before I tell any of my stats, 84% of all stats are made up.
And the other 16 are actually flat out lies, right?
No one quite caught the joke there.
It's after lunch, right?
It's just after lunch.
Just after lunch. Give them a break.
It's going to 85% of all stats now. But yeah, again, I think that the Internet of Things is certainly what is going to start proliferating in a very major way in mid-market up to enterprise. So the devices that people have traditionally been bringing are going to start to change, right? And so Google Glass and watches and all these other things are going to proliferate quite predominantly in the next couple of years.
I think that the mobile phone, that device, has just become more and more central to behavior over time. And it's really about the applications that are riding on that phone. And that's really where I think the opportunity for us is as an industry and as a channel. It's about integration. It's about the services. It's all around aligning those things to the buyer's journey, what they're actually trying to achieve, and seeing where the opportunity is there.
So people are budgeting and spending on wireless right now, but to the point you made, what brings it all together is the integration. It's not selling the point technology anymore. It's about delivering a solution that they're actually using to increase their productivity, both internal for their own employees, but also externally to whether it's supply chain or their customers.
I think it's definitely just the tip of the iceberg, and it leads to what I call BYOS, right? Because there's software on the device and applications, right, and those need to work. So consumers want their enterprise applications like Link or Jabber or whatever working on their devices, and they want, in our case, Plantronics makes headsets that work for UC, for contact center, and for personal, but they're all going to employees that are all three. Well, not all in the contact center, but that bridge these devices, and they don't want one, say, headset for their desk phone, one for their mobile phone, one for that. They want something that seamlessly transitions around that.
We've talked about BYOD, which is vendors and manufacturers we've loved. The fact that you can fall in love with your own device, you bring in your own device, an emotional connection, etc. But kind of stepping back from it and not wishing to introduce another crass 4-letter acronym into the mix. It was really more about BYOE. It was bringing your own experiences that you had with that phone. It was what you were doing in your personal life, as you're talking about with wearable devices, and how that translates over across to the work environment, particularly in the mid-market sector, where you don't have an enormous staff. There's not a whole bunch of IT guys around trying to make this stuff work. You bring with you to your workspace stuff that you know works. It's really about bringing that experience.
It's an interesting, I mean, it's an interesting point. You know, we started talking to the industry about what we dub the experience economy, and it's very much representative, exactly as you're saying, Mark. Is, you know, people bring expectations with them, and most of those expectations are born in your house, right? Consumerized products, your own AP, your own internet access. Things are great. Everything works great. You know, just like you turn on a TV and change a channel, open up your device, your laptop, whatever, turn it on. Everything's working. You take that expectation with you when you get to the coffee shop, when you get to the airport, when you get to the hotel. I'm sure everyone here used the hotel Wi-Fi. When you get to a stadium, anywhere you go, your mobile life has these expectations that you brought with it. The question is, really, can you afford not to provide the best experience to that consumer?
For us in the channel, I think the real opportunity, we're talking about experiences and devices and so forth, but to me, the real opportunity for the channel is to have a series of conversations with the customer. And that, to me, is the critical thing we all need to get better at, right? Is we all can talk about speeds and feeds of our products, and we know that when we're talking with the right kind of buyer, that will work. But when we're talking about business decision makers, technical decision makers that really own the challenge of running the mid-market and owning the mid-market's performance, mid-market company's performance, that's a big deal. And I think all of us on the stage are mid-market business leaders, right? So we can relate to that. We see those, the resource trade-offs that we have to make, and that's, I think, the conversation we need to be able to train all of you to have, right? And then that can't be just a one-time thing. And having that conversation is really the critical element.
It's interesting because at SpectraLink, we're in a kind of a unique position in the fact that we are looking at the user experience and we're looking at the actual device. So we're actually counter BYOD, to be honest with you. I mean, we make very special purpose-built wireless handsets. But when I'm telling my sales team and when I'm coaching my resellers, I'm really going after what are you going to be using the product for, right? What is the user experience, or what are you trying to do to drive a better experience with your customers? So you're talking about user experience, and we've all talked about the fact that everyone brings likes their consumer device because, believe it or not, I mean, we got to give Apple a lot of credit. They built the best user interface, and to be honest with you, the enterprise market and even SpectraLink missed it, right? The fact of the matter is what is the user experience? And so as a reseller, you know, you might have approached your business from a communications perspective or a wireless perspective, and now I really believe you have to go out there, as we've heard earlier today, you've got to go out to the line of business and you've got to say, hey, what do you want? What are you doing? You know, what are your biggest problems, and then how can I help you? And then put the right solution together. So I think it's absolutely key that we're talking to the lines of business about their problems and then putting technology and application software together to solve it.
Great.
There's a lot of services revenue in that as well, obviously.
I think when you broaden out the conversation a little bit, I mean, according to Gartner, by 2017, 50% of all businesses in the U.S. will not supply a device to their employees, right? That's a pretty big stat, right? That's half of all companies, right? The real stats, that's a real stat. I'm quoting a source there. But to the point, you know, BYOD and device proliferation over the last number of years, it's still very much in its infancy.
Have you seen a move to choose your own device where IT will say, here's the suite that we support, you can pick within that, but not sort of bring whatever you want?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a BYOD world, you don't really have the luxury to prescribe the device. More often than not, at least the customers that I talk to are dealing with anything and everything. And certainly when you get into education market, for example, higher education market, students are going to bring the brand new, fanciest thing that they found, probably in an Apple store, and you're going to have to deal with it. Right? You better be prepared. And I think to the earlier point, I mean, you certainly can't build a network after the fact. Right? You can't put a network in the middle of a school year in a healthcare organization, in manufacturing. You got to plan and prepare for these things now as you're putting in your new infrastructure. It's got to scale for the years to come. You can't rip it out because, you know, you fail to meet the needs. I mean, that's really a big thing, particularly when you're trying to drive applications through the network. You can't do it after the fact.
We found customers really enjoy, well, employees of customers enjoy being able to choose a little bit, like being able to choose 2 headsets, because there are a lot of different varieties and stuff, and choose one that they maybe use more with their mobile phone and bring home and stuff and is portable, and then one higher quality one maybe for their desk and office.
I would say that as we've seen the unified communications wave sort of become more mature across both enterprise and mid-market, that the attach of headsets has been a little lower than what was originally predicted, say 4 or 5 years ago. That's starting to change. We're seeing a higher percentage of hands-free devices going out with phones, if you will. But that's because we're pushing it as an industry to have that strategy in place. And what we think about is that last 3 feet of the solution is really super important, because if you're rolling out a new platform, whether it's IP telephony or unified communications or whatever it may be, and the end user doesn't have a great experience, or they're afraid of the new way to do dial a phone, do IM, doing video, whatever the case may be, then they're going to reject the platform. And that actually can have that backlash on the software platform and the services engagement and the whole infrastructure that's laid out. So we really want to get the end users excited. And a lot of people want a shiny new toy. And the device can actually drag people into the platform. It's kind of a fascinating thing that can happen if the right work is done to profile and give end users the tool that's right for them.
I would like to echo those comments on distracted driving, etc. You're starting to see more and more out there. States are passing laws where distracted driving and texting, it's now a primary offense, meaning they don't need to have you doing something else to stop you. If they suspect you of texting, they'll stop you and look at the phone, and before you know it, you're looking at a fairly significant offense. Now, as individuals, obviously we've got a responsibility for that, but there's a real risk management conversation that you should be having with your customers out there. And it's a great way of starting that debate. It's a great way of looking at mobility in general, collaboration tools, the way they work when they're on the road, looking really at the overall simplicity of the solutions that are provided as well.
Well, certainly echo your comments there on the last 3 feet being important, not to just because we have the headsets and complete the last 3 feet, but really for the UC experience. If you go and watch people using the solution, it's a part they get wrong often, and a part they can struggle with. So making sure they know how to use it and know how to just make calls easily and effectively is great. I love the concept of the hands-free workforce, and I think that's, in many ways, the starting point for a real interesting set of services. So yes, now you're hands-free and you can walk around, that's great. So you're also wearing a device that has multiple radios in it, all kinds of capabilities. It can talk. It can pair with your desktop, with your mobile phone. It could even pair with conference room phones and do interesting things based on your location. So you mentioned mobility being about making better decisions faster,
Yes.
basically. So one security policy decision might be if I walk away from my screen, then I should lock that, right? So if it's sensitive material. We can do that automatically, right? We can be paired to your mobile phone and your desk phone, and as you walk away, we will automatically lock your screen and then bring it back.
In the old days of, I'll say, the hands-free market, you were kind of talking to a telecommunication analyst or maybe a contact center analyst or a procurement specialist. But what's happened is that decision on hands-free devices has really moved into IT. And certainly there's probably someone who's evaluating the technology and trying to validate the integration and making sure it actually works and that there's good user profiling going on. That's typically, I'll say an architect type person, but that person has a manager, and that person that manager reports to a CIO or someone senior. And that's where I think we really need to have the conversation, is with someone who's really a technical decision maker, or even better yet, a business decision maker.
You go back to the planning side of it, is what are you trying to do in your airspace at any given time? And again, it's a finite resource, so you're going to run out at some point, and ultimately that experience, as we've been talking about, turns to something negative. And so having visibility as to what's going on in the air, people talk about wireless IPS or interference avoidance, interference detection capabilities in the wireless infrastructure. It's a very important piece, right, is to be able to monitor and visualize actually what's going on in the RF, so that you know when you're running out of space, right?
It really is an extension of BYOD.
Yeah.
When you're out there and talking to these end users, it's truly an opportunity to upsell and add more value.
Yep.
So you're talking about the security, talking about the productivity of your employees, you're talking about work satisfaction of your employees. So it's almost as if, you know, when you think about the hands-free workforce, if you're not having that conversation, you're actually doing a disservice to the sales cycle that you're in right now and missing opportunity.
You know, we do see some really interesting trends that I think affect big companies and mid-market companies that we haven't really talked about here that speak to business agility. But with so many people working in different places around the world and not having as many people in a headquarters location, that business model, as it sort of disintegrates, it creates a lot of, I'd say, agility opportunities and agility challenges for the mid-market. And it's really in the kind of the wheel well of this group, right? This is what we do as an industry, is try to help companies that have a very geographically dispersed workforce make it seem like they're not geographically dispersed at all. And that's a really big deal, because what we're seeing, we think, is a decline in the idea of location. So it's not as important to have big buildings with all of your employees in them, right? And you go down the hallway of any company nowadays and half the offices are empty.
Yeah.
Why do we have so much real estate, right? These are the kind of conversations I think we need to be having and training each other to have. And it's not really about the speeds and feeds and the sensors and the distance and DECT, and I don't want to take anything away from the core technologies that we're talking about here, but really it is about helping these businesses be more agile and be able to execute against the things they're seeing.
But some would argue, if your business isn't in the process of transforming, you're probably in the process of going out of business, right? Because your competitor is transforming. And I think that when you think about the infrastructure and being able to do things flexibly and be able to make changes on demand, you look in today's age, chief digital officer, chief marketing officer, a lot of these people are carrying the IT budgets now. I mean, it's a different world that we're living in, and so these changes, certainly the channel has to adapt to the types of conversations, but businesses themselves, they require that ability to look inwards as to what their goals are and what types of changes they're going to make. So I think it's a big conversation around business transformation and who's spending money these days.
I think this whole topic of business agility, I think about it in terms of, again, buyer's journey and flexibility, agility, how fast you can move, how fast you can deploy, and how fast you can change things. And when you look at the value of money, you've kind of got a time value of money and a risk value of money. Well, the one technology that we haven't talked about so far that really plays on that is cloud. And having the option for a communications platform that fundamentally it's the same whether you've bought it and owned it and you're depreciating the thing, or whether you're paying for it out of CapEx, and it's exactly the same approach, and you can kind of turn up and turn down endpoints and move them around as you wish without any risk and not risking that capital. That's kind of exciting for a lot of companies right now. At the beginning of the year, it kind of clicked for me. We were at Enterprise Connect, and they had that panel that was up there, the end users, first thing in the morning. And that one guy, he said, talk to me about cloud. He said, well, cloud's nothing but a financial tactic. You go, you're absolutely right. Provided the experience maintains throughout the entire thing, and it makes sense to the industry that you're addressing, and it makes sense to that particular buyer's journey.
Certainly for innovative CIOs, probably the number one item that's top of mind for them these days is analytics.
Right.
And people throw around big data, small data, different types of data. The real question is, in terms of agility, how do you make a decision without any information?
It's things like the integration of ScanSource, for example, into your communications platform that starts to make things really interesting. And we got some sales leaders up here, and it's things like which were the top 10 customers by revenue and size that you haven't spoken to in the last year. That feels like it would be a really, really good piece of data to have, and therefore a corrective action plan around it. You've never been able to do that before. And it's the integration of these solutions like SFDC into the communications platform and the back-end analytics. You guys have got a great opportunity around this. If you can figure out how to tell that story, get ahead of that, and start having those debates. You're not talking about a type of phone or how many buttons it's got, or whether it's a color screen, or how you program the music on hold, or whether I can wipe a wireless cell phone. You're now talking about the heart of really what they do and addressing the core needs of how they get more effective and more efficient as a business.
Building the ecosystem, taking technology that we all provide as sort of, I heard, enabling platform, and you know, we all have a different perspective of what the enabling platform is. It could be headsets, it could be, you know, Wi-Fi networks, it could be, for me, a specialized device, but they're enabling platforms, but what do they enable? What do they do? And so I think getting into the application space of healthcare, retail, manufacturing, and consulting from that perspective allows you to sell it basically pulls through the infrastructure. So you talk at the application layer to the line of business leader, and you're basically driving infrastructure investment, but you're talking to them about what their business problems are. So I really think the application is a good space, and then all the surround services around that application is probably the approach I'm seeing the marketplace heading.
What we're all saying here is that the customer has changed. And I think for all of our partners that are out there, going and calling on the people you're comfortable with, whether it's the telecom manager or the IT manager, you're selling yourself short.
Yeah.
It's time to get out of that box and have those borderline awkward conversations the first couple times, but are you meeting with the chief marketing officer? Are you meeting with legal, like you mentioned earlier? Are you hitting the CFO and being able to have a comprehensive financial discussion about what they're doing? And I think that, again, if you're sitting in this audience saying, how do I differentiate and what message do I bring back to my sales force? I think that's one of them. Who am I talking to within the organization? And not as much leveraging the analytics to say, when's the last time I talked to that customer, but who have I spoken to in that customer? And how do I go wider and deeper and be able to have those conversations? Because as you said, it pulls it all through. So whether it's public cloud, whether it's private cloud, whether it's hybrid, it's having that flexibility to have a solution that they can bring to the end user. Because as you mentioned earlier, a lot of times it is a financial decision that expects the exact same performance and deliver the same solution. And it's just being able to have a flexible option.
For me, selfishly, from SpectraLink, there's always going to be a need for devices. So wherever the data is, whether it's local in a data center or it's in a cloud. But from a cloud perspective, I think it's almost like BYOD. I mean, you know, more and more applications and more infrastructure is going to be in the cloud. And it's here to stay. I think it's, you know, an OpEx, CapEx decision from a device perspective. I just want to be able to give my customer an OpEx option. So, you know, through leasing or through other avenues. So if they want to be full OpEx for their entire IT or telecom, we should have a solution for it.
I do think that this whole notion of being a financial and delivery model is really the right way to think of it, because nothing changes because you go to cloud in terms of the services that get delivered.
Right.
It's cost and maybe some quality of service stuff that you can do. And maybe you can find somebody who can do it cheaper than you can and provide better SLAs for uptime and so forth. So there's always opportunities, especially in the mid-market. And then the last point I would make, and I know that Plantronics and Jabra are in the same camp on this, is that we're all looking at this RTC, or real-time collaboration opportunity, which basically says we can move the communication protocols and the call control into a browser. So instead of having to have it at client or you know, anything that's, you know, a big device, we can use a browser, and that's pretty powerful. And again, we don't necessarily have big solutions for it today, but if you think about in financial services or in contact center where you have tight security lockdown, virtual desktops, or work-at-home agents, you can have somebody getting in with a browser using a hands-free device that can get full call control and integration with their application. So there's some really cool stuff that's happened in the last few years in RTC that we're all pretty excited about.
Look, the reality is right now the cloud is hot. I'm not even sure that statement made any sense at all, and this is probably the only audience in North America that would understand it, but you guys get where I'm going. It's, look, if you're not talking about cloud to your user base, somebody else is. When I look at our particular industry, you know, you've got prem-based solutions are growing somewhere between 4 to 6%, depending which set of analysts you want to believe, but we're looking at CAGR in the 40+ range in cloud deployments. It really is hot right now. If you don't have a dog in that hunt, you probably really want to think about what you're doing here.
One analyst firm that I was recently talking to, you know, they made a very good point, which is, you know, the cloud, and over time when, you know, servers went from physical to virtual and now out in the cloud, it's actually contorted computing altogether, where the browser is now the server, right? The browser is now going out and calling all sorts of different resources. Even if you go to one web page, it might be calling out to 5 or 6 different places on the internet pretty easily. In network terms, we'd refer to those as network flows. But it's interesting how, and you tie back to BYOD and cloud, you know, these two pieces put together has changed the paradigm of daily life, of computing now.
And talking about the environment that we're selling into, we're talking about mid-market customers who have enterprise-class problems. It's the reality. The same challenges and concerns that these folks have, they might as well be working for a Fortune 500. It just scales a little different.
Right.
But, I mean, every topic that we discussed today and every challenge that we're trying to solve are those challenges. And I think that the value that the partners in the room are going to be able to have is to be able to understand these different solutions and help solve problems again.
You know, to me, and maybe it's just the way that I think about Wi-Fi, but planning is always top of mind. And I can guarantee any customer that you're going to talk to, what they have today is not what they're going to have tomorrow. And being able to support more users, more devices, more applications, and ultimately more bandwidth is top of mind. It should be top of mind for them. And, you know, ripping and replacing an infrastructure can't be done overnight.
At Jabra, we're facing, every day we wake up in a B2B hands-free communication market that's north of $500 million in the US every year. And, you know, to some companies, I worked at Microsoft for 16 years, that $500 million is kind of like, eh. But to us, that's a pretty big deal. And I think it's a pretty big deal for all of you. And we think the way that we monetize that $500 million market is working together with you on helping you build out a richer solution for your customers. And that's what we focus on every day. It's what we execute against every day, is helping the channel have deeper, more meaningful conversations with more customers.
The last thing is APIs and programming. So either just the amount of stuff you can do with very little programming experience to link together services on the web, from our products, from others on-prem, and make these really amazing solutions that go far beyond just what you can get out of the box is truly staggering now. So I think there's just a whole lot of opportunity there.
What we like to think that we're all about is choice and flexibility in choice of deployment models, communication solutions, and really aligning the solutions that we put into market through you guys around the buyer's journey.
And in this mid-market, and really in all markets, I think you heard the overall message from all of us was, you know, the technology is there, but you really need to get into your customer's operating environment and understand what the hell they want to do. You know, what are their issues, what are their strategies,